So welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening, to everyone on Zoom and on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming in. We look forward to a great session with all of you. A couple of instructions before we begin the session for today. You can use the chat box to chat with our team if you have anything to say to us. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen, and post in your question. Do remember to address the question to a specific speaker if you have it. If you'd like a specific speaker to answer your question, or you can put it in if you'd like a generic answer or the thoughts of all of them on the panel. You can use a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be beginning with our three esteemed speakers speaking about this topic. Well, welcome everyone to the inaugural session of the Prana Interactive, an initiative focusing on universal wellness by Worldview education. Worldview, over the last 10 years of its existence, has had the aim of reimagining education, which, for us, is the cornerstone of progress ever since the advent of civilization. Education, however, transcends beyond the traditional form of schooling as we know it, but is actually a lifelong process which values the uniqueness of each human being and seeks to realize the creative power and potential within. From among the 4 pillars that Worldview has focused on, the Prana program focuses on the pillar of health and wellness. Prana in Sanskrit means the life force. The history of wellness speaks of the cultivation of harmony in one's life to activate this life force. The Prana initiative explores the idea of universal wellness through the discovery of the interactions of your inside world with the outside world and the impact on each other. So we ask you to step away for a moment from the rather popular understanding of wellness as isolated parts of life and discover the concept of universal wellness through the ideas of the old and new, the East and West, which lie at the intersection of nature, culture, food, linguistics, living spaces, yogic studies, etc. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed panel of speakers today, who are thought leaders and experts in their own way in one of the most fundamentals of prana, food. Each of our speakers will be sharing their thoughts and experiences with you over the next hour, and then we will address your questions to them. As a reminder, you can share your questions at the bottom of the Q&A with the Q&A box. Without further ado, we are honored to have with us today our first speaker, Dr. T. Campbell, a nutritional biochemist and a thought leader. Dr. Campbell is trained at Cornell and MIT in nutrition, biochemistry, and toxicology. His work has been dedicated to the science of human health for more than 60 years, with a primary focus on the association between diet and disease, particularly cancer. Although very well known for the China study, which was recognized by the New York Times as the Grand Prix of epidemiology, Dr. Campbell's profound impact also includes extensive involvement in education, public policy, and laboratory research. Our second speaker is Ms. Amber Scott, founder of the Food Literacy Center. She is the CEO and food genius of this nonprofit called the Food Literacy Center and is at the center of the California-wide Literacy Month and a food writer as well. She has been named Food Revolution Hero by the Jamie Oliver Foundation, Food Tank's 20 Innovators Protecting the Planet, and a TEDx Sacramento Changemaker Fellow. And from our very own India, we have Ms. Sheila Krishnamurthy. She is a registered dietitian with over 37 years of professional experience in the clinical, corporate, and communication space in India, an active member of national and international dietetic associations, and is currently a nutrition and wellness consultant and works independently as an advisor, a writer, anchor, corporate trainer, and a counselor. But I'm very excited to also introduce once again to you Ms. Amber Scott, who is the CEO of the Food Literacy Center. And I'm very excited about the conversation that she's going to have because it's something that I felt was also very relevant to me. She works with students and children in the US, helping them understand nutrition, helping them understand good food. And in a very interesting line to what I have heard is make children eat their veggies. So it's not just for children, it's something that I felt that most of us adults also need to learn. It's about the behaviors and how you move into those behaviors and learn how to develop healthy eating habits. Like I was telling Amber just before all of you came onto the call, is that my favorite vegetable is a potato. And she told me kindly enough that I was in the average. But I would love to know how to inculcate and incorporate more vegetables and more fruits and healthy, constant behaviors in my diet, which become a lifelong process rather than something that is a quick fad which evaporates over a couple of days. So with that, Amber, I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us, and I'm sure we all have a lot to learn from you. So presenting Miss Amber Scott.
Thank you so much, and I'm delighted to see so many wonderful folks online here. So good morning from California, good evening from other parts of the world. And I'm going to share a little bit about Food Literacy Center, the nonprofit where I am the founder and the chief genius. And in the meantime, I have a quick poll for everybody because I want to find out if you eat your vegetables. So if you could fill that out while they post that, and then I'll quickly move into my slide presentation, which I believe you guys are going to be sharing that as well. So if you could just fill this out, do you eat your vegetables? Yes, I eat them every day, sort of, or no. Oh, we got a very veggie friendly audience here. I love it. Or no one wants to admit that they don't. Love it. Well, congratulations. You guys are definitely going to be our food champions. Part of our, food literati, as I call them, people who are interested in changing our food system. So thank you for letting us know about your vegetable fun. We do have one person that's here to learn. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for admitting that. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how we can fall in love with our vegetables. So let me start by talking about Food Literacy Center. So here in the US, we want kids eating 2 to 3 cups of vegetables every day, but only 4% of our kids are protecting their health by doing so. So as a result, we have in Sacramento alone a 40% childhood obesity rate. And across America, 1 in 3 kids has type 2 diabetes. And these are all preventable if we eat our vegetables. But we know that that is a struggle. And here in America, we have 2 generations of Americans that do not know how to select or cook with vegetables. So in 2011, I started the nonprofit Food Literacy Center to inspire kids to eat their vegetables. And we do that by going into low-income elementary schools. And in those schools, we go into the after-school program and we teach cooking and nutrition classes. So we're teaching STEM-based education. So we're teaching kids to measure and to make an emulsion. We talk about parts of a plant and which parts you can eat. And we make it really fun because we're working with kids that have never seen foods like broccoli or pears before. So it's really critical that we reach these kids at an early age and help them develop habits that will last a lifetime, because we're trying to teach them to protect their most precious asset, which is their health. And we completely agree with the philosophy of Prana that what's good for you is also good for the planet. And as these kids begin to discover and become food adventurers, they begin to understand that connection and they fall in love with foods like cactus and beet. In fact, every year we hold a Veggie of the Year contest where we have local chefs come in and prepare a dish for our kids, and they taste a wide variety of vegetables, which is very scary for some kids to taste 5 new vegetables in one day. And as they taste those vegetables, and they vote. And some of our winning vegetables every year have been, it started with carrot, that was our first, then bell pepper, And in the last few years, we've seen cactus as vegetable of the year. We have seen beet as vegetable of the year. So we're really proud of our students as they become food adventurers, because they really do learn to explore a wide variety. And that is what we're aiming for. So here's just our mission statement for you. And these are actual photos of the kids that we serve. I actually, when I first started the nonprofit, I would wear a camera around my neck as I taught. And this is Jasmine. And so this is a pomelo we were passing around, and look at her eyes. She was so excited to smell that pomelo and then to taste it for the very first time. Next slide. So I wanted to show you some of these photos because these are actual kids, and this is how much fun they have with vegetables. And it's so important for us as adults to think about that. Like, we're actually denying our kids and ourselves the joy of these amazing, delicious foods. And it's not about taking food away. It's about, what are we adding? What are we missing out on? This joy that we could be having. So that's why I want to make sure to share these photos with you. I also wanted to provide the definition of how we define food literacy at Food Literacy Center. So we define it as understanding the impact of your food choices on health, environment, and our economy. Next slide, please. And at Food Literacy Center, this is Feliciana. She's one of my favorites. She's all grown up now. This is when I first started the nonprofit. And so this is who we serve. So in Sacramento, we have not only is there a large percent of kids who are facing diet-related diseases like obesity and type 2 diabetes, but we also see these being connected to living in food deserts where there isn't a lot of access to fresh and healthy food, and also being connected to poverty and being connected to food insecurity. And I used to work in a nonprofit that did microfinance and health education around the world. It actually took me to India for the first time many years ago. And that was where I first began working in malnutrition. And now in America, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we see malnutrition being tied to obesity because our kids have access to calories, but they are not the best calories for their little growing bodies. So these are the kids that we serve, and these principles, of course, work with everybody. I use these on my husband and my parents and the rest of my friends and family. So next slide, please. So these tips are not just for kids. I want to share some broccoli boundaries and some radish routines with you. These broccoli boundaries are sort of healthy rules that we help to establish so that we can create an environment where our kids will be successful. So one of our broccoli boundaries is to check your diet at the door. And this is really hard for adults. Even for myself, when I started the nonprofit, I was a pescatarian. And what I realized very quickly is that other adults would come to the classroom, again, with food insecure children who don't have a lot of food at home, and sort of try to establish at this very young age with these kids a specific diet, like being a vegan or being a vegetarian or eating raw. And the point with our children is that we need them to add fruits and vegetables. That's the most important thing. And when we think of it from that perspective, rather than what do we need to eliminate and what do we need to take away, it's a very different mindset. And we have not seen a single volunteer push back on us on this rule, because it's really about what do the kids need and what is the most important thing. And the most important thing is that they get fruits and vegetables into their life. And so if we just focus on that rather than thinking about a diet, we can focus on more of a lifestyle, and it's a little more attainable and it's a little easier to digest, if you will. So, so we start with this broccoli boundary. Next slide, please. And then our second broccoli boundary, and I'm just going to share a few of those with you today because of time, but we have many others. These are just some of the top tips and tricks that work every time we use them. So our second one, ultimately, when we're trying to change kids' behavior, we want them to eat and consume those fruits and vegetables. You actually have to start by first changing knowledge, which is very, very easy with children. And then you've got to change their attitude. And this is true for adults, kids. We've got to change our attitudes towards fruits and vegetables. And this little rule is the best way to do that. So we say to our kids, don't yuck my yum. And what that means is that the food that you might not like might be your neighbor's very favorite thing, and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So don't yuck my yum. And this gets kids to stop, because their immediate reaction to a new fruit or vegetable is to say, ew, gross, right? So when we stop them from having that reaction, we're ultimately giving them an attitude of curiosity, and we're helping them to become food adventurers. So don't yuck my yum. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk about a couple of our radish routines. So these are those habits that we're going to repeat again and again, behaviors that we're going to repeat again and again until they become a habit. So our first radish routine is to eat a fruit or vegetable with every snack or meal. And this one's really important because at the top of my talk, I talked about how our government dietary guidelines want kids to eat 2 to 3 cups of fruits and vegetables a day. Well, what is 2 cups? Is an apple a half a cup? Is it a quarter cup? Is a piece of celery I ate? It's so hard to keep track, right? Especially for a busy parent, you don't know. So we just say eat a fruit or vegetable with every snack or meal, because that way we know you are incorporating enough fruits and vegetables into your life. And it's something that the kid can remember to say, oh, mom or dad or grandma, I didn't get a fruit with my snack today, right? And we see the kids reminding the adults in their lives that they need their fruits and vegetables. Next slide, please. The other radish routine is positive affirmation. And this one is so, so, so important. When I first started Food Literacy Center, I saw a lot of shaming and blaming. And particularly because we are working with a population that doesn't have equal access to the foods that many of us idealize, this can be expensive as a lifestyle. And so we want it to be very practical and very approachable. And we don't want people to feel badly for the way that they eat, because what happens when, think about how much education you have had to give yourself. Think about the time you're committing today to learning and understanding about diet and nutrition. We are a very busy family. That becomes really inaccessible. And so we don't want people to feel badly that they haven't had the same opportunities to learn about this stuff. It's not required in schools. That's why we're there. So we are trying to start with where people are at, because think about the news. There's fungicide in the orange juice. There's pink slime in the meat, right? Dun, dun, dun. And what that does to us is it makes us go, I don't know what to do about that. I think I'm just going to tune all of that out, and I'm going to keep eating the way I've always eaten. So what we want to do is bring the joy back, bring the fun back. Let's make this approachable, and let's champion people for trying and putting in an effort, and make them feel like this is a fun path and a fun journey that they actually have equal access to. So we start actually in our program with a peanut butter sandwich. It's a very common thing to eat in the United States. And so we start there, but we swap out the jelly for fresh fruit slices. And this is how we get kids to begin practicing eating a fruit or vegetable with every meal. Our third radish routine is to eat with the seasons. This is so important because you'll hear kids in January is our winter, and you will hear kids who taste a tomato that came from halfway around the world, and it will be orange instead of bright red. There will be no smell. It will bounce when it falls, and the kids will say, I don't like tomatoes. Well, they're right, because that tomato is not delicious. But if you give them a beautiful, ripe, red tomato in the middle of August when they're popping off the vines in Sacramento, they're going to fall in love. I once asked a group of kids, what is a blueberry like in winter? And they said, the skin is all baggy. And then I said, what about a peach in summer? And they said, the juices run down your chin. So kids have this visceral memory of the foods that they're eating. So it's really important that we give them the highest quality. And the highest quality, if you're eating in season, is also the cheapest, and it's also the best for our planet. Next slide, please. Well, that is my presentation. I am looking forward to your questions. I am looking forward to our other speakers. Thank you for having me, and thank you for eating your vegetables.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was energetic and absolute fun to listen to. I will be eating my vegetables and trying things, hopefully. And I'm sure that that's what our our audience here as well is going to do. We'll ask them, if you have any questions for Miss Amber specifically, please feel free to drop them in your Q&A box, and we'll answer them probably at the end of the session while you're sending them these. We have someone who says it's an excellent way of making it exciting for the kids. So I'm sure that all the parents here are going to be using some of your tips and tricks to get their kids to eat veggies and probably do it themselves as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amber. Yes. While we're getting our slides on, we'll move on to Ms. Sheila Krishnaswamy. I apologize earlier. I think I mispronounced your name, ma'am. What we would like to hear from you in your field of expertise here is how nutrition and all of what Amber has said with regards to understanding what is good for you to eat and understanding really the journey of your food and getting even children to eat healthy and yourself. How does that translate into the Indian scenario? What would be what has been your experience with the Indian diet? What have you seen over the last couple of years, and how can we take from all of that and bring it into our daily lives? So over to you, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prakriti, for the introduction and for giving me the opportunity. Thanks to Worldview and Prana Interactive for that. Okay, let me begin by saying that India has moved from a very ethnic, traditional way of lifestyle and eating habits to a more global and modern way of eating and living. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it's going to benefit your health, that would be wonderful. But unfortunately, the reality is far from benefiting the health. So what I have seen in my experience is not just over the last couple of years, but over the last many years, that people have changed their lifestyle and their eating habits, and we have moved away from eating traditional healthy meals to very unhealthy combinations and things like that. And one thing what we always are in India is we are carbohydrate concentrates. Our starchy food intake is quite high, like white rice, chapatis, potatoes. You mentioned that in your introduction. So that it's a lot of starchy foods. So if you see a typical Indian meal, Indian thali, whether it's an office cafeteria, I have worked mostly with the corporate companies in the last few years. So whether it's an office cafeteria or it's a wedding meal or even a home cooked meal, there's a mound of rice or a pile of chapatis, and a lot of starchy foods, and there are little katoris on the periphery or on the outside, towards the outside, away from you. And those katoris are filled with a little bit of dal and a little bit of vegetable and a little bit of maybe buttermilk or curd or something like that. But then the quantity, when you compare the quantity of the starchy food in front of you versus the rest of the things in a little away from you, it's very, very different. And the intake of pulses, vegetables and fruits, and I'm so glad Amber brought this whole question up in the very beginning, that the vegetables, and I was very, very happy actually to see the poll result where most of the people said that they do eat vegetables. Now, connecting to that, I have a poll question. So can I have the first poll question, please? Is it possible to put it up?
Yes, just a second.
Thank you. My first poll question is also on vegetables, coincidentally. Yes. So if you're a family of 2 adults, what is the quantity of vegetables you would use for cooking per day? And the second one is also visible, so you could do the second one too, maybe one and two, one after the other, but just we will stop at the second one. We might need to give it a little time for the audience. Oh, wow. Okay, half a kg. So let me give you another example. If you're a family of 4 adults and you buy 1 kg of vegetables per day, you could actually and divide it by 2 and make it half a kg for 2 adults per day. So that's easy. That's an easier way of calculating. So looks like, wow, whoever's saying 1 kg is, wow. I think they have it right. And even 3/4 kg is not bad, that's 4%. But majority, I think, are going towards half a kg per day.
We're still waiting. I think there's about 100 people left to vote. So I think we're waiting. We'll leave the poll on for another 10 seconds. If you haven't voted, please do so, and then we'll end the polling so that Sheila can get the right answers of how many vegetables you are actually cooking. For all of you who said that you eat vegetables every day in Amber's poll,
yes,
we'd like to see how much vegetable you're cooking.
Yeah, and this question kind of follows up Amber's question very well. It's great to know that everybody eats vegetables every day, but how much is also important, the quality and the quantity.
Yes. Okay, we're ending the poll now.
Okay.
And those are
those who's so I think 50% have said half kg, and we have 24% saying that's almost 1/4 saying quarter kg for 2 adults. So that's like what, 125 grams approximately per adult per day, which is way below the advised recommendation. And some of you have said 3/4 kg, which is great. And 1 kg for 2 adults per day is awesome. I mean, that's really mind-boggling. And please do continue to eat the 3/4 kg responders and 1 kg responders. That'll be fantastic if you can continue to do that. Half a kg, you need to do a little better, because half a kg for 2 adults comes to about 250 grams, a quarter kg per adult, maybe plus or minus a few grams, maybe. So quarter kg is still a little less than the recommended, requirement. A quarter kg is really, really too low for 2 adults. So it's not just about eating vegetables every day, but it's also about the quantity and the quality of vegetables that you eat. And when I say vegetable, it's not potatoes and onions only. It's everything. Let's talk about the green leafy vegetables. This is not a poll question, but talking about green leafy vegetables, how many of us really eat green leafy vegetables? Yes, we use coriander leaves, we use curry leaves in our cooking every day. That's a sprinkling, which is great. Don't stop using that, please, because that brings in so much nutrition for us. But how many of us really use amaranth leaves, drumstick leaves? These are traditional Indian green leafy vegetables, which have been in existence for decades, or maybe even centuries, I don't know. But then, we will go to the next question a little later. Thank you very much. So we really need to incorporate all these leafy greens in our cooking, in our diets very regularly, if not every single day. Obviously, it becomes difficult to eat it every single day, but then do use it more regularly. Now, drumstick leaves, or we know it as moringa today, right? I remember as a child, I used to be given drumstick leaves to eat by my mother, and I disliked it. But today, everybody eats moringa. Why? Because it's been popularized by the developed countries, and we have brought it back to our place, which I'm very happy about, of course. And why not? If we can learn from somebody else, if we forget our vegetables and fruits, and some developed country is there to teach us on how to get back to our traditional ways of eating, how we have unlearned a lot of things, so we are relearning from the others. Why not? So be it. It doesn't matter where the information or knowledge comes from. If it is a good thing for us, if it can help to build our health, that would be fantastic. So let's get back to eating a lot more vegetables. like I said, half and 1/4 is a little short of what what we really require. So we need to, and it's not just the green leafy vegetables. We have a huge variety of vegetables in India. We're very fortunate, not to south, east to west. We get a lot of vegetables. Even seasonal vegetables are available. So I think it's very important to eat more vegetables. Now let's go to the fruit poll, please. The next one. I think some people have already answered it, but if we can have all the options visible, can we do that, please?
Yes, all the results are visible. You can have a look.
Oh, I need to scroll down, is it?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, all right. I didn't do that. All right. Yeah. Okay, once a day. Wow, amazing. 61% eats fruit every day. That's great. So majority of you have already met your fruit requirement, because we say 1 to 2 fruits a day is good for health. Twice a week, still not too bad, but you could increase it to to once a day. Maybe not suddenly jump to do once a day. Maybe from twice you could go on to 3 times, could go on to 4 times, and then 5 times, and make it, you'll get used to it. Once a week, not so satisfactory. Occasionally, oh my God, never. Oh, 3% says never. And that's, I don't know why. I don't know whether it's lack of availability or dislike. Some people even dislike, fruits. So, well, but those of you who don't eat fruits at all, the 3%, I would say start eating, whatever fruit you like. So let's talk about fruits. I don't know how many people really eat guavas. And India, again, has a huge varieties of fruits. Amla, the Indian gooseberry, it's so rich in vitamin C. It's the highest vitamin C, fruits that is available in India. And a lot of us don't eat it, unfortunately, right? Guava is very, very rich in vitamin C. Again, a lot of us don't eat it. But instead of going to a roadside cart and buying those guavas, we would rather have go to a supermarket and buy all those fancy fruits and vegetables which are all covered in plastic. Why do we have to do that? We have excellent markets. We have excellent local markets. In fact, farmers markets are coming back into practice in the developed countries. And I think we already have a lot of farmers markets and open markets. I think we need to buy fruits and vegetables from there, to buy local and seasonal fruits and vegetables. And that is the best way to get your nutrition also. Eat 1 fruit a day at least, and also eat at least 3 to 400 grams of vegetables, a little less than half kg maybe, but definitely between 3/4 to half kg of vegetables per person per day would be a great bet to get all your vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants. I mean, fruits and vegetables are storehouses of nutrition, and that's what we should be increasingly eating. Our plate should not really be filled with starchy foods, mounds of rice and chapatis and what have you, but it should be more of fruits and vegetables. In fact, the National Institute of Nutrition in India, which is based in Hyderabad, has recently come out with a beautiful depiction. It's on their website. If you go to the National Institute of Nutrition website, you'll see they have a beautiful diagram, pictorial depiction of it's called My Plate for the Day. And in that pictorial depiction, you will see half of the plate. It's a round plate, and half the plate is covered with fruits and vegetables. A little more than 1/4 of the plate is the cereals and the millets, and a little less than 1/4 of the plate is all the protein-rich foods. There's a very small strip of fats and oils, and there's milk and curd kept on the outside. So what our institute, the National Institute of Nutrition, is telling us is that you need all the food groups. You not only need it in the right quantity, also the right quality. So everything is very, very important. Okay, so I was not planning to ask these 2 poll questions, the next 2 poll questions, but I'm so glad that people have already, answered it. So how often do you drink milk by itself and not in coffee or tea? 43%, yes. Twice a week, once a week, occasionally never. Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's not a mandatory thing to drink milk every day, But why I ask this is because I wanted to connect it to the curd question. The last question, the whole question from me today is one small cup per day, one medium-sized cup, okay, one large cup, all right, not every day, okay. So those of never, all right, no problem, probably lactose intolerance or some other issue with curd, that's okay, not daily. Maybe you have other options to get your calcium and protein. One small cup, medium-sized cup, large cup, that's great. The reason I asked, can I close this window now?
You can just press the minimize button yourself.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So the reason I asked the question for milk and curd is because they are rich sources of calcium and protein. And of course, we do have a lot of pulses. I did not include all the other food groups because the poll would get very, very long. So we do have a lot of other sources of proteins in our diets. We get proteins from nuts, we get proteins from seeds, from pulses, from dals. A whole lot of protein-rich foods are available in our country. And by and large, even the meat eaters don't really eat meat every single day, right? That's from what I have seen in my experience, in consultation experience. Not many people eat meat every day. It's usually over the weekend, maybe a day or two in a week, but not every single day and in every single meal like the developed countries do. So the rest of the days, like 4 to 5 days a week, most of us are all vegetarians. And our protein would come from either milk or curd or dal or pulses or nuts or whatever you're eating. So we do need to increase the protein intake. We do need to increase vegetable intake. We need to increase the fruit intake and reduce the carbohydrate or starchy food intake in our diet on a regular basis. So just to give you a couple of, okay, sorry. I just wanted to give you this. Yeah, okay. So there's a National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau, which did a survey in 2017, which showed that 33% of urban men and 44% of urban women are either overweight or obese. 31% of urban men and 26% of urban women have hypertension, and 40% of urban men and 27% of urban women have high triglycerides. So this is not a very pretty picture, and I don't think the numbers have changed much in the last 3 years. But this is mostly because of the lifestyle that we lead, and also the food habits that we have, and that have changed actually over the last few years. So what we need to do is we really need to identify the foods that will build health for us. And we need to think of preventative measures to stay healthy. Because today, I think, thanks to the pandemic, one good thing that has come out is nutrition and immunity is a very hot topic today. Everybody is talking about, what foods to eat, how to prevent infections, and how to build up immunity and all of that. So, which is a great thing. It is a very, very good topic. So from what I see, I think the future of nutrition is better, brighter, it's brilliant. It's also more vegetarian perhaps, or maybe more vegan. It's more home cooked, more organic, more natural, more convenient, more sustainable, and more planet friendly. And I think wellness is also very much in, because everybody is talking about wellness and not illness anymore. So I think the wellness is as people say, wellness is the new normal, so to speak. So I think with this, I would like to end my talk. Just a few thoughts, and over to you, Prakriti. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I think it's been extremely enlightening to understand the perspective from the Indian diet point of view. And like you mentioned, bringing back some of our local indigenous foods is something that we have also, really spoken about when we talk to, our students and participants about the importance of eating locally, about the effect it has on your body, and how it is holistic nutrition, like you said. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. To everyone who's attending, if you would have questions for Ms. Sheila, please put them in. We see a lot of questions coming up, and we will be taking them all. But I'm happy to announce that we have managed to conquer technology. It happens when all else fails, invoke a Shah Rukh Khan reference, like I did in the beginning. We have managed to conquer technology, and we do have Dr. Campbell's slide presentation up, which we will be showing right now. Dr. Campbell, may I request you to please address our attendees now? We are all eagerly waiting to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. First question, do you see me?
Your video is not up yet, but I think we have our slides, which is absolutely okay. We are more than happy to hear you and learn from you.
Yes, I hope it's not too confusing, but first off, I have to say I really enjoyed the two previous presentations. That's really the important material for everyday use. So I'm proud to be part of this. What I want to talk about is the science, which I've been in for many, many years. And on the, I'm using some slides here. And you'll notice that I have three words on the slide: food, diet, and nutrition. We sometimes get those words mixed up. We all know what food is. We know more or less what diet is. It's the collection of foods that we customarily consume. And nutrition is the biological expression of those foods. That's the definition I like. And it's at that level that I really began to understand what food can do for human health and other issues. So I say this is a very provocative kind of statement, I know, for perhaps many people, but I say the nutrition of whole plant-based foods, the topic of a previous presenters, the nutrition of whole plant-based foods does more overall to treat disease and restore health than all the pills and procedures combined. That's the procedures that we presently use. Next, if you notice the next entry, the supporting evidence for this rather provocative conclusion, it really comes from a study of the relationship of food with chronic degenerative diseases primarily. That means heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and so forth. These are sometimes called the diseases of aging. And so that's where most of our information comes from. If you can go to the next slide where it says effect of protein on carcinogen-initiated liver cancer. I got involved in this many years ago. You'll see there, it says 51, now it's 52 years ago in the 1960s when I was in the Philippines organizing a national program for feeding malnourished children. And at that time, we were supposed to be making sure all these children got enough protein. That's important, of course, we all need protein. But at that time, it was a lot of emphasis on animal-based protein. And so I had some information that really wasn't quite right. And then there was a study from India. It's nice to be back talking in an Indian audience. There was a study from India by Dr. Gopalan, Mahadevan and Gopalan in 1968. They were doing an experimental study on the development of liver cancer in experimental animals. And they thought that if they could feed them higher levels of protein, such as 20% of protein, as opposed to 5%, that the animals that were exposed to a carcinogen and then fed 20% protein, they would not get as much cancer. In fact, they got these results here. The animals given higher levels of protein, they all got cancer, and the ones given lower levels did not, even though both groups had the same exposure to the carcinogen. That information, together with my information on the Philippines, is what led me into my research program. Because what it looked like was suggesting that increasing protein meant increasing cancer, a very provocative idea. It was hardly believable. So now if we go to the next slide, it says high dietary protein and early cancer. And if we could sort of animate our way through this one at a time, you'll see that over the first 12 weeks of cancer development, if the animals have fed 20% protein, like my colleagues in India did, if you're fed 20% protein, the cancers are growing quite well. If we fed them 5%, they did not grow, just like what was reported by Dr. Gopalan and Mahadevan. Then we followed up a lot of studies over the next 20 years and learned a lot about this process, not just for cancer, but for other diseases as well. So in that first 12 weeks, if we fed 20% during the first 3 weeks, we got growth. If we switched the diet to 5%, turned it off, switched it on, turned it off. For me, that was really remarkable. And that's probably one of the most striking things I think we saw early on, that we could turn cancer on and off by nutritional means. That was very exciting because that was an idea that hadn't really been appreciated at that time. And also plant protein. Plant protein that did not work. Incidentally, the protein that we were using to turn this cancer on was casein, the main protein of cow's milk. Whereas plant protein, in contrast, did not turn on the cancer, even when it was fed at 20%, essentially. So this was an effect of not just casein, this animal-based protein, but it was similar to the animal-based proteins from other sources as well. So the next question was, since this was so spectacular and exciting, I wanted to know, what was the mechanism? What I mean by mechanism is that in biochemistry, we like to look to see what kind of biochemical reactions are changing to account for this effect. I think you would all agree that if eating protein in excess, especially from animal-based foods, is turning on cancer, you want to know how it works. That's what people want to know when they're trying to develop a drug to block something. So what I'm showing in this slide here is a scheme of how cancer grows from the so-called initiation stage through promotion, through progression. In the case of humans, that may take many months, but in any case, we look for a mechanism. And so we did that for a number of years, looking, hoping to find the mechanism that responsible for this. And we couldn't find one because there were so many. I'll mention just a couple here. You'll see that it says the first one increases cell entry of the carcinogen into the cell, for example. Another one says decreases the production of a bunch of cells that kill cancer cells. And so this is normal for our biology, if you will. And so as we looked for this explanatory mechanism, every time we looked for one over a period of 12 to 15 years, I finally decided there was no such thing as one. There was a whole bunch of things all working together. 8 of these activities of those 10, for example, they would be increased, they gave more cancer. 2 of the activities which we normally have to protect us actually were decreased by this increasing protein. More cancer still. So the high protein diet was operating through many mechanisms, and I'm sure far more than the 10 I'm showing you here. But what struck me about this was that when the protein is turning on cancer and doing some other things too, it's doing it by a whole host of mechanisms. Keep that thought in mind because I'll come back to that in a moment. Real quick, let me show you that if we look at the relationship between protein consumption and various cancers and heart disease in places around the world, I'm going to show you here a series of slides. You can see them one at a time. So they were called correlation studies or observational studies. And what that basically shows is that these are, incidentally, these are data from other researchers, actually prior to or about that time that I was working. And what they were showing was that as animal protein is increased, either in the form of meat consumption in some cases or in form of total fat, but as animal protein is increased, those diseases all increase as we compare these different countries. Really quite fascinating. And it was very impressive. The idea that even when we start to put in small amounts of animal food into our diets, as illustrated with this comparison, putting in small amounts of animal protein in the diet, it tends to increase a variety of cancers and heart disease. There's one that says, the last one is meant to be coronary heart disease, cholesterol in the lower right. And so all of a sudden, this effect of the high protein diet causing these diseases was not only operating through many, many different mechanisms, it actually was affecting many different diseases. Cancer, just a bunch of cancers being just some of them. So now we'll go to the next slide where I'm showing here, it says whole food, plant-based diet prevents, suspends, and cures all these diseases. At the time I wrote a lot of this up for the public was in 2002. I was interested at that time to see if there was any evidence in the literature that had been missed in prior years about the effect of plant-based diets on these different diseases. Was it more than just cancer, for example? Yes, it was. And so here's a list of a bunch of diseases all affected in one way or another by a plant-based diet. In other words, when a plant-based diet is consumed, these diseases tend to disappear. They tend to go backwards, actually reverse, a very exciting concept. But the point I want to make here is that this protein effect on cancer that we were seeing in the laboratory actually applies to a bunch of other diseases as well. If you look on the left-hand side of the slide, it says a whole food plant-based nutritional effect is very broad, is very rapid. We see changes begin to occur with a matter of actually a few days. It continues for over weeks, maybe months, but this effect starts to occur very quickly. A lot of people are not aware that a nutritional effect can operate so fast. It does. So if we go down the list here, if the dietary change is sustained, and what this means is that this kind of diet should not be used as like a drug. You take it today and maybe for a week or so, to resolve a problem, and then you go back to eat what one wants to eat. Actually, it should be consumed as a lifestyle, continuous. And so this kind of effect, this whole food plant-based diet, has now been shown to reverse these diseases. That's what we saw in our animal studies, to reverse these diseases. Let's say I can say it can be used to treat diseases. And we see these effects, as I say, very fast. Blood cholesterol begins to drop very quickly. If you're working with diabetics or on insulin, for example, it's really important to stop their medication quickly, because the dietary effect is so strong in reversing diabetes that if those people are maintained on that same drug, they could go into a worse condition, maybe called hypoglycemic shock. Now let's go to another slide here. You'll see that I'm saying here that nutrition, for me, this is a really big idea. We tend to study nutrition in the context of individual nutrients. We all do that. We've been doing that for decades, across the world. We think of nutrition and studying just protein, or studying just fat, or just studying just some nutrient, some mineral, some vitamin. That's not what gives us the really good information. I call that reductionist, one thing at a time. In reality, nutrition is all these nutrients working together, what I call holism. They all work together in the body through, as I showed you, a bunch of different mechanisms. It also works through a bunch of different nutrients, all working together, producing a bunch of different diseases. So I'm talking about nutrition in the context of this whole food plant-based diet. In a sense, it's across the board, and it's amazing effects. You really at all ages, even older people as well. And the effect is pretty fast. I know nothing in biology that is so provocative as this. Now, I'm calling this holistic interpretation of nutrition as being consistent with the ancient ideas, not so ancient maybe, but consistent with the practices of countries in the East, such as India, Ayurvedic medicine, for example, such as China, typical traditional Chinese medicine, such as many other indigenous peoples too in the West, in the world. In other words, what we have done in the past and we have continued to do up until the present, in many cases, especially in Asia, is to assume that whole foods do matter. In fact, we use whole foods in the form of herbs sometimes. We use those things to actually help us treat disease as medicine, if you will. That stands in contrast to this concept called Western diet or Western medicine. I'm speaking from the West. I'm speaking from the United States. And we supposedly, we use the Western diet, which is a diet that's rich in animal-based proteins. And we assume in that case that this diet is going to operate through a single nutrient. It doesn't, affecting a single disease. So it really, we get into practicing medicine in the West through the use of drugs, taken one at a time for a specific condition. We forgot nutrition. We don't teach nutrition in medical training, for example. So I'm going to argue that the Western diet is not what we should be on. I'm going to argue in favor of the Eastern or the older diet that concentrates on the use of nutrition. And in that case, we can do so much more with it than just simply trying to figure out which drug or which chemical is doing something. And the Western diet is pretty much propelled by corporate interests. It's really about money, making money. So the whole idea that we have to treat our health and use diet according to what makes the most money, that's not consistent with nature, and that's not consistent with the best of health. So let's go to the next stage here. I'm going back to one I had before. So nutrition is holist, it's not reductionist. It's a really important point. And I think a lot of people listening to this will stop and think about it a little bit and see how it relates to your life, how you use food, how do you produce food, how do you use food, in fact, actually to treat illness. Now I'm going to finish off in this idea. I told you before that this information that I just summarized for you quickly is based on studies of disease for heart disease, cancer, and things like that, the degenerative diseases. One of the groups of diseases that no one really has paid much attention to are the virus diseases. The one we have now, the coronavirus. And so we did a big study in China. And then during the early 1980s, we ended up working with our Chinese colleagues, surveying diet and disease conditions in a total of 170 counties across rural China, and in a second version of that with Taiwan as well. But in any case, we in China, we actually measured a whole lot of things, nutritional things, including some viruses. This is during the 1980s. And to see how it might relate to various diseases, such as breast cancer, here you can see on the slide, it's one example. These Western diseases tended to be concentrated in certain areas of a country. So we went there to see what was responsible. I'm showing you on this slide here, says this COVID crisis, lessons from China. It's based on our studies with hepatitis B virus, which causes liver cancer. That's what my laboratory work really was about. In China, amongst these 8,900 people, we were able to measure how much of the hepatitis virus, I'm going to argue it's similar to in some ways it's similar to the COVID virus, but in any case, the virus, when it infects, when it first comes into the human body, it doesn't produce symptoms. What we see are antigens. That's the HBsAg plus. It comes into the body, the virus is now landed on its body, is ready to do something. Either it's going to create some symptoms, such as liver cancer in this case, maybe in the case of the coronavirus, some other kinds of respiratory illnesses and so forth. But in any case, that virus can either cause its effect and cause death, or the body can react against it and produce antibodies. So when a virus lands on us, we don't know it, of course. There's two pathways in theory that it can follow. Either it can start causing its problems, and a variety of different problems for different viruses. There's all kinds of viruses doing different kinds of things, but also at the same time, the body treats all these viruses in the same way in terms of wanting to defend itself against the viruses. And so what it does, it enhances the immune system activity. And most notably, it causes the formation of antibodies. So antibodies essentially is deactivating the virus. So let's really quickly summarize this chart quickly again. A virus comes in, it lands. We can get tested for that. Now we're positive, let's say. At that point in time, our body, if it's working right, will cause antibodies, will resist that virus and will produce lots of antibodies. If it's not working right, if we're on the wrong kind of nutrition, it actually causes the problem. And in our particular case, we saw when the antigen was present in people, that's what was related to liver cancer. In contrast, and wait, I forgot to say something here. that was related to liver cancer. And the people who actually got liver cancer are the ones consuming animal protein-based foods and all the other nutrients that go with it. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. It didn't take very much animal-based food to actually create the response. In contrast, people consuming more plant-based foods, and we measured lots of different things about plant-based foods. This was back in the 1980s. What we saw was that people consuming plants form antibodies. People consuming animal-based foods cause the symptoms that can kill, in this case, liver cancer. So in this chart here, you see that what kind of nutrition favors immunity, and that's what I just described. We measured a bunch of nutritional factors. And when we're consuming plants, we have a tendency for these virus diseases, whatever they may be, to actually become deactivated, to form the antibodies. And so I'm showing in the next slide here, just some of the real data that we had. I don't want to get into the details of this, but we had much information here that we collected to convince us that when we consume plant foods, the amount of antigen disappears, it goes down. If we consume plant foods, on the other hand, the amount of antibodies formed goes up. I mean, really pretty remarkable idea. Consuming plant foods protect us against the hazards of the virus, whatever it may be. Consuming plant foods increase the formation of antibodies, and it's protecting us. That's what plant foods are for. It's the best mechanism we have for resistant disease is simply eating the plant food itself, not just because it doesn't have the animal protein, but also because it has lots of other good things that are fiber, the right kind of protein, and so forth. I'm showing you the next slide here that this arrow, it goes from antigen to antibody and back to the antigen again. It goes back to the antigen when we tend to consume animal food. We're asking for trouble. We're asking for trouble. So when we consume plant foods, we're more likely to be able to form antibodies when a virus comes in and lands on our body. So to protect ourselves, it means basically consuming plant-based foods. And you can see is this chart here, and here it says more animal food. It does exactly the opposite of plant food. It increases antigen and it decreases antibody. That's bad, obviously. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to get now just to right here, I think nearly the end of this. I'm going to take that chart I just showed you, that scheme, from that we developed this information from the hepatitis B virus, but I'm saying it applies to, my hypothesis is that it applies to the coronavirus just as well. But in any case, here it is for the coronavirus, for COVID-19, if you will. You see the same chart. And so the COVID-19 that comes in, we call that the antigen. Now it's positive, we get infected, and those of us who get infected with it, now we're positive, we don't have the symptoms yet. We might get them, And if we do, we're in trouble, or we can get an immunity to those viruses. And I showed you in this slide here, the whole food plant-based diet. If people switch to a whole food plant-based diet, they're much more inclined to then have that virus converted over to its inactive form as represented by the presence of antibodies. In contrast to those who do not do that, are not consuming plant-based foods, consuming more animal-based foods, they are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences. That's what our data showed us. Really quite amazing. Now let me come back and make one more before I turn to my book, The China Study, really quickly. I told you that most of the research that we have on this diet thing and diet and health thing is based on degenerative diseases, okay? I'm going to suggest, yes, it also applies to virus diseases. And we have all kinds of virus diseases, many of you know. I mean, common colds and flus and AIDS, I should say, a bunch of different cancers. These viruses are nasty little agents, but our body's prepared to handle them collectively if we just simply eat the right foods. And that means now we have information not only for the degenerative diseases, I'm going to suggest now we have the same information applies to the virus diseases. So we're in good hands. All we need to do is consume the right diet, and my two predecessor presenters are talking about the most important thing of all, especially getting people to eat this kind of diet, especially amongst children. That's where the whole game plan really starts, in my view. I'm showing you here this next slide, the China study. I think many of you are familiar with it, so I'm told. It's been really very successful. I did not know when we wrote this. I wrote it with my son, who's a physician now, between 2002 and 2005. It's done really well. That's where basically I'm just sort of telling the story at that point in time. What had I learned in the previous 50 years, 55 years at that time? And then I published another book in in 2013. I called it Whole, A New Worldview. And that word whole, I'm going to suggest, as I said in the beginning, that whole is holistic nutrition. It's whole foods. It's not the supplements thereof. I must say this too. Some people think if we know which nutrients in food do what, we could take the nutrients out and put them in a pill. We call them nutrient supplements. No, was deeply involved in that 20, 30, 40 years ago. That is unlikely to create much effect, if any. It certainly does not represent nutrition. That's a sort of a pharmacology approach to nutrition. And I really, quite frankly, object to that. I don't mean to talk about dietary supplements of herbs and things like that, which are really whole foods for the most part, dried down, mixed and matched. That's a different story. I'm talking about individual nutrient supplements. So in this book, Whole, I elaborate on that point. That I'm really emphasizing that we consume whole plant-based foods, mixed and matched as we like. We can maintain ethnic cuisines, different parts of the world very nicely with local herbs, spices, and flavors and that sort of thing. And so we can maintain our ethnic cuisines wherever we happen to be in the world, but basically we will want to use plant-based foods. I have a new book coming out. This is the next one. It'll be out in December. It's now on Amazon, for those of you who have access to that. It's on Amazon, and I call it The Future of Nutrition. What I'm talking about here is just to some extent what I very briefly described in this presentation. Namely, I'm asking the question, why did we go down this track of assuming that Western medicine is the best? Why are we trying to export Western medicine to the rest of the world? I've seen it in China. I worked off and on there for 25 years. I've seen it elsewhere. It sounds great. Yes, it makes money. It can make a lot of money for someone else. It does not necessarily make health. Now, there's some good aspects of Western medicine, I confess. There's some good aspects of it, but you got to be very careful how we choose this. The Western diet and Western medicine, I must say, is not necessarily for making the best human health. It's the best for making a business. And that's the distinction between the two. Going to my last slide, I just quickly summarize. We have an online program here that is a nonprofit. I don't get paid for this. It's just what we do. This has been very successful. It's with Cornell University. And people can get there by either seeing the call number or the call line. Thank you very much. I realize I've taken a lot of time, but I have to say I'm trying to cover about 65 years worth of research. It's not easy. The main bottom line is eat plants, eat whole food plant, use a whole food plant-based diet. And I can assure you the basic fundamental science, from my perspective and my experience is so impressive that it's almost inarguable, really, that we should be doing anything other than using plant-based foods. And one final comment. We are now in a stage where we recognize the damage done by not consuming plant-based foods. In other words, going to the root. We create more disease by using a Western diet. It costs more money. We're about to break the bank in the United States with the cost of healthcare, for example, and we do poorly on that front. That's one issue, but maybe the biggest issue of all is that consuming plant-based foods help to protect against the environmental problems that now we're becoming aware of. The chief cause of the environmental problems, climate change, degradation of water supply, soil, and so forth, that's related to the fact that, and this is the United Nations speaking, I've spoken before the UN agency for this, that's because we are promoting the use of animals as a means of food. That's very expensive, it's costly to the environment, and if we don't get that right, then all the rest of this discussion we are having is useless. So I'm going to say, consume plant-based foods for your own health, for your interest in helping others, maintain their health, and also in the interest of our planet. I think we're all on the same page. And it doesn't make really, quite frankly, any difference, which country we happen to be in. We all have unique characteristics for our own local societies and communities, it's fine. But we all do the same thing when it comes to incurring disease and the use of food. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. That was a wealth of information. And like you said, trying to concise all of your 65 years of work into the short time that we have given you is a task, but we thank you for that. It was extremely insightful. And I know that while we couldn't see your video, but just hearing from you was absolutely absolute wealth of knowledge. For everyone who's stayed on, thank you so much. I know we're running slightly behind schedule, but we did conquer technology at the end of it. I will address a couple of the many questions that have come onto our Q&A box to our panelists. In the interest of time, I will try and keep it my questions short. I'll address them to you, and we can have your thoughts on them. So we'll start with a question to Amber. Amber, we have a question of any instances that you have of very stubborn teenagers eating their veggies. How did you handle these at the Food Literacy Center? And also, what would you recommend as a year-round fruit or vegetable, which can be homegrown in your home gardens, which would attain minimal harvest to stomach journeys?
Well, on the last question first.
Yes.
The last question, I'm sorry. On the last question first, the kind of plant-based foods obviously I'm talking about is vegetables and greens. This means greens, fruits, obviously fruits, greens of various kinds, grains, rice and other grains, and the whole grain form if possible. So we got grains and legumes. Really, legumes are critical. Beans and peas, and I know you use a lot of those in India, of course, lentils and so forth. And so that and even nuts and seeds, they're okay. Use them modestly, but they're all very helpful. All these foods in a whole food plant-based form. That's the main thing. I don't recall your first question.
I was addressing that to Ms. Amber actually, with regards to her experience with teenagers and fussy teenagers, and if she has anything to share with us on how to get them to eat their greens instead of just the potatoes. So I'd request Amber to address that question with her experience with teenagers.
Sure, yeah. Teenagers are quite similar to all people, right? Again, it's about attitude. It's about becoming a food adventurer. And so, of course, if you can start kids very young, it's going to be easier when they're teenagers. But the number one way to get any age of child, whether it's a teenager or a young one, interested in eating their vegetables is to help get them engaged in the kitchen, helping to cook, because they take pride in it and then they actually want to taste their creation. And so I also think it's really important to just be a role model and be eating those fruits and vegetables. Because if you take a bite of something, you say, oh, this dish is so delicious. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how tasty these greens are. We did such a good job. They're gonna start getting curious and want to take a taste.
Great. And would you agree with the same kind of fruits and vegetables that Dr. Campbell addressed with regards to what could be grown in your home garden, which would be the least harvest to stomach journey? Or do you have a suggestion? Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, if you grow anything, congratulations. Like that, starting anywhere is really important. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in, you know, what has the highest benefit versus the least benefit. But I think, you know, we find some of our moms that we do cooking classes with, they're embarrassed that they like something like iceberg lettuce, right? And they think that they have to love spinach. And if they just need to start somewhere. So, you know, if iceberg lettuce is the thing you love, great. I do encourage you to try the next thing and try, you know, if you don't love spinach, maybe there's another kind of green that you'll fall in love with. But certainly greens of all forms are very vital to our health. They give us a lot of health benefits, but, you know, start anywhere.
As a follow-up to that, I would actually, on the topic of teenagers, and I'm sure this is a universal conversation that would happen with teenagers across, is the concept of thinking that they need to eat less or diet or not eat in order to maintain their, you know, the physiques, or the conception that having a good figure is the result of not eating or not eating well, or the many things that you've probably heard. So I'm sure there are a lot of parents out here and a lot of people out here who probably want to understand how to convey that to their children and probably to themselves as well.
Absolutely. And we encourage our trainers and volunteers actually not to focus on weight. That should be a conversation with a medical professional, because you absolutely can end up unintentionally setting these kids up for, you know, body image issues and eating disorders. So we do try to focus more on things like, you know, even in Dr. Campbell's presentation, he talked about acne, for example. When you're eating more fruits and vegetables, your acne clears up. You know, your skin and your hair are beautiful. So we do try to focus on some of that from the physical, the way you look, but we try to avoid talking about weight.
Right, great. Thank you. I think that's something that we should probably try and reiterate to all of us, all of our children and ourselves, that it's about healthy eating more than anything else. And I'll come back to you on that note, Amber. Sheila, would you have something to add to that as well? Considering I'm sure that those are questions that you probably get around dieting and weight loss as well as a nutritionist. And then I have a follow-up question which has been asked to us as well from the audience.
Okay. Yeah, it is. I don't see very many teenagers in my consultation, because mine is mostly corporate oriented.
Right.
Then yes, from whatever little I have seen, yes, teenagers are very, very fussy eaters. And I think there is, you know, in India, what we see, at least in the urban regions, what we see is there are big differences between boys and girls. Boys want to build muscles. They want to eat very high animal protein foods. They want to build muscles. They want to look big. Whereas the girls want to, you know, look slim and thin probably. And so they want to avoid eating meals regularly. They want to lose weight, or, you know, maintain a very slim figure. So there are two kinds of teenagers that we see. But unfortunately, I think a lot of teenagers are not eating healthy. You know, whereas boys or girls, they're not eating healthy. They're not eating the right balance of foods. They're not eating the kind of food they should be eating to build health for, you know, for their own health and long-term maintenance of health into adulthood and old age. And that's the time when everyone needs to concentrate on eating right and eating healthy. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And well, we try to convince them as much as possible. If they have good role models at home, you know, then it's that much easier for them to follow their parents or, you know, their peers.
Right. So be the example that you want to see at home. Right. So as a follow-up question to that, Sheila, you work a lot with corporate employees in India, and you know, what would be the experience that you share with them with regards to especially the impact of a poor diet on, say, decision making, and how that affects your mental cognition, how that affects your ability to take decisions. While of course it's a larger aspect of overall health, but how does diet relate to say decision making impacts in the corporate world?
Okay. So eating unhealthy foods, of course, not only affects body health but also brain health, and also not eating at the right time, especially skipping breakfast. This is what I have seen in the corporate world. A lot of people skip breakfast because they're either running to work, or they are stuck in a traffic jam, or they don't have time, or there are various reasons. They're not hungry, whatever. They have so many reasons and excuses to skip breakfast in the morning, unfortunately, and that really affects their productivity in the morning. Because from what I have seen is, the morning hours, that is a pre-lunch work time, is the most productive time for most people.
Right.
And it really affects their work. In the morning, they're not able to concentrate. They are not able to keep up schedules. And because they don't have the brain does not have the required fuel in the morning.
Right.
Because after an overnight fast, the last meal most people eat is the previous night's dinner, and they don't eat anything after that. It's in the morning. It's just a cup of coffee, or maybe a slice of bread or something like that. Because, like I said, no time, not hungry, etc., etc., and they have to rush to a meeting, or they have to log in at either 9 o'clock or 9:30 or whatever it is. And first thing they do is, of course, check emails and do all of that. So it's always the work that takes over, and sorry, hunger is suppressed, and that can lead to not only lack of concentration and reduced productivity, but also hyperacidity and a whole lot of gastrointestinal issues. Sometimes can also affect their weight, because they tend to overeat at lunchtime. Skipping breakfast, they're very, very hungry at 11 o'clock or at lunchtime. So they tend to eat a very large meal, and usually something that they love, something fried, deep fried or something like that. So, it's a very, very cumulative effect that happens over a period of time. So yeah, that's what I have seen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheila. I will circle back to you as well. Dr. Campbell, I have a list of questions that have been coming for you as well. And a couple of them, I'll combine them. One of them is that organic and whole foods are generally considered to be expensive and not as easily available. So what would be your advice on how to replace them with easily available vegetable-based products? And also with regards to how certain proteins is what people think might not be freely available in plants, or plants don't necessarily give you the entire spectrum of proteins, say for example a B12. So how can all your protein requirements be completed by plants? Are there some specific ones which address the needs of the proteins that people think are usually only associated with animal-based products?
Well, the protein question is a very important one. Historically, we have generally assumed across the world that protein primarily is provided by animal-based foods. And that, of course, is incorrect. We now know well that there's protein in plant-based foods too, number one. Number two, we also need protein. It's an essential nutrient. So that's a question of, well, how much do we need? And that's about 10% or so of total calories. And the third question is, what's the best source of that kind of protein? Plants provide all the protein we need. We do not need to consume animal food to get protein. Even if we were, for example, in theory, to consume only, let's say, tubers or potatoes, for example, which is one of the lowest protein vegetables, if you will, that's still enough. Believe it or not. We obviously we don't only live on potatoes, clearly. But my point is that, we absolutely do not need to consume animal food for the protein content. Right. It's just, first, you had another question. Did you say something about chronic kidney disease at one point?
No, I said organic and whole foods are expensive and difficult to find. Yes. Right.
So the organic thing, yes, ideally, we'd like to take the food that's produced just by nature. That's a nice idea. we prefer that. We also know in this day and time that that can be the most expensive. So it's not necessarily accessible to everyone unless they're growing their own food in their own garden, which I strongly advocate, obviously. We should, you know, go back to the soil and think about that and how to do that. But if we aren't able to get the organic food, the more expensive kind of food, well, the best thing to do is still eat the vegetables. It's still better, even if it's not organic, still eat the vegetables, because that's still a whole lot better than eating animal-based foods. But organic, yes, you know, there's some evidence. There's actually the evidence for organic foods is not as strong as what we like to think. The pure science, when you compare the two, it's very difficult to do that kind of study and get convincing results. But we all generally agree that organic food is probably a little better.
Thank you. I have a follow-up.
Sorry, may I answer the protein question from an Indian perspective, please?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so the question about getting enough protein from plant-based foods, I totally agree with Dr. Campbell. It is possible. Just to give an Indian perspective, an Indian example for this question, we are all used to eating rice and dal, or roti and dal, or rice and sambar in combination in our meals. So a cereal pulse combination, it could be rice and dal, it could be a millet and dal, or it could be a roti and dal. So a combination of such will definitely ensure that the complete protein is available in a plant-based meal. Along with that, of course, we usually have some nuts or seeds or something like that. Those can be used as a snack. So these are all, I'm only talking about plant-based foods. But again, in Indian meals, we normally use either curd or buttermilk as well. We finish off with a curd or buttermilk. So that also provides some amount of protein. So there is plenty of protein available in a vegetarian or a plant-based food as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that was an interesting perspective from the Indian point of view as well. Dr. Campbell, what in India we use a lot of clarified butter or ghee. If you're familiar with the product and how milk basically, like Sheila as well mentioned, is an important part of the diet for children in India and for a lot of adults. So what would be a suitable substitute for you, or what would you have to say about the nutrients that we get from these clarified milk products?
Well, the clarified butter products, if you will, obviously I'm not so familiar with that because we don't use it here. Yes. And I've actually been puzzled a little bit about that because quite frankly, it's the science tells us that we should, keep that at a minimum. Right. As much as possible. I mean, added oils, for example, as we say in the West, added oils is not a good thing. Right. To start with. And so I know that you can correct me on this, but some of the data from India also show that heart disease is a little higher than it should be, compared to what it could be.
Yes.
Yes. And so, and some people are suggesting in science it may be because of that, too much of that added oil, if you will, ghee or whatever you call it. So that's all I can speak about that is from the sort of scientific point of view.
Fair enough. Going back to Amber, one is people want to know what has been the advancement that you've seen, if there's been any progress with students and children understanding nutrients and food over the last 2 decades, and also what techniques, particularly with regards to don't yuck my yam and behavioral changes, have you found to be most successful, and what is it that sort of ties it on for them?
Okay, so I would say the most important thing in creating the behavior change is 2 things. One is that we make it very fun. And so the kids actually love our program and they want to come. And the second thing is repeating those behaviors. So we do something really fun every week. We do something called Produce of the Day, where we bring in a new fruit or vegetable. So with our recipes, we're starting with that peanut butter sandwich that they're familiar with, and we're taking them on a very slow journey to the brown rice and kale salad that's very different from what they're eating in their homes. So that's a slow journey. But our Produce of the Day, we are trying to shake them out of their comfort zone and get them to be food adventurers and to become curious and to change their attitude. So we're giving them a new fruit or vegetable to taste every single time that we see them. And the kids actually tell us this is their favorite part of our program. So not only do they end up having fun with the cooking, but they actually become so curious that it's their favorite thing to taste a new fruit or vegetable. So those are really the two main things that we see. And to give you a sense of the data, we actually tally every single teacher, tallies every single student each week on their attendance roster to say, did they taste the produce of the day, yes or no? Did they even just take a bite? And we are up to, in some of our schools, 100% participation in doing that. And, you know, when you first start in a new school, you might see, you know, 20 or 30% of the kids being willing to try that fruit or vegetable, even just a bite. So we really do see positive change. And then we begin to see change in the entire school culture, the teachers doing it, the principals getting on board. So it's really quite a joy to see.
And we're so glad. I think that's a tremendous feeling to have as well. And more power to you on the work that you're doing there. And I hope that we are able to take some of these tips and tricks back to our own students. For Dr. Campbell, we have a question about if a majority of the population follows a plant-based diet, would that not have an effect on the ecosystem with regards to the traditional life cycles, with regards to grass-fed animals, for example, which contribute to the entire cycle of nature? So wouldn't that affect our the cycle of nature per se?
Yes, that's what I referred to in my last comments when I spoke about the environment, use that word,
Yes.
or climate change. Yes, I'm really speaking specifically about our use of livestock as a means of nutrition, especially in the Western world, but elsewhere too.
Right.
And I did speak about this topic before the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organizations that went around the world at that time. So they have agreed that the primary cause of these issues, the ecosystem, or environmental issues. As far as the ecosystem specifically is concerned, we see a lot of very worrisome things happening. We see, for example, loss of species in the world. That's been documented in many places. We see, misexpenditure of funding. We see a loss of waters, especially what we call the deep aquifer water, deep into earth.
Yes.
We're drawing down on that water, and that was put there about 70 million years ago, is my understanding. And so we're doing things now to affect our water system. It's really tragic. It's frightening. And so animals use about 10 times as much water as we humans do to produce the same nutrient content. And by the way, I want to take this opportunity too to congratulate Prana. I loved your statement about the purpose and the mission of Prana. And I think especially when you talk about education, obviously really including younger people in that effort, I find that younger people really do get it. And I think this issue, making it whole, making it considered in the variety, in the context of the whole ecosystem, other animals, it all works together. All we need to do is eat the right food.
Great, thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to address a question to Sheila really quickly, and this is a question that's popping up quite often. With regards to what Indian foods would you recommend as high sources of vitamin D? Because I think a lot of people working indoors now, many of us included, vitamin D, which you would normally assume to be very freely available right under the sunlight, is actually under, you're quite short on it with a lot of people. So what would you recommend as a good source of vitamin D from an Indian diet point of view?
Yeah, unfortunately, not many foods contain vitamin D. So sunlight is the solution. I think one needs to go out into the sun, maybe during lunch break or tea break or whatever, instead of just sitting in front of the computer or in the offices or just chatting with friends indoors. Just go outdoors and chat with your friends. Have your cup of coffee or tea outside in the sunshine. Get some sunlight, direct sunlight on your skin. But yes, there are. I mean, we're talking about plant-based foods today, but vitamin D rich foods are fish, egg yolk, and fortified milk. Fortified milk is now available in India. So these are the foods that contain vitamin D, but none of them are plant-based. So if you are, a plant food lover, then you're going to find it difficult to get vitamin D. But anyway, sunlight is the solution.
It's free, yeah.
Yeah, for vitamin D. Yeah.
Get back to nature. Yes,
I can add to that mushrooms. If mushrooms are exposed to sunlight, which often they are, then they also contain vitamin D.
Right,
So.
but unfortunately in India, we don't grow mushrooms in the sunlight. It's grown, most of the mushroom growers do it indoors. So, yes, I agree with you, Amber. Thank you for that.
Well, that's food for thought. So essentially in India, we need to get vitamin D, get back to nature, get outdoors and get your daily dose of sunlight. We have so many questions coming in, and unfortunately, because of time, and I know and so many of you have stayed back, including the panelists who spent a lot of time with us, like longer than you promised us. So I'm so grateful that you have taken this time to address us. There's so much that we've learned from you. Of course, food is a very personal choice. Food is something that everyone has their own personal beliefs in, but it has been so enlightening to understand all three of yours domains and work. And I think it's the work that you have done over the last so many years is something absolutely that is to be commended in various spheres. And we are talking about different perspectives, different understanding of what nutrition and food is. And that's, I think, at the essence of what Prana also is when we're talking about holistic understanding and taking back what is most suitable to your own body, which in turn translates to your environment, your community, the earth at the end. So I, unfortunately, in the interest of time, I'm unable to take all the very, very many questions that we have been receiving. But once again, on behalf of the entire team of Worldview, Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for your time and insight. Amber Scott, thank you so much, and continue the wonderful work that you're doing with these teenagers. And I hope to go beyond potatoes. Dr. Campbell, we have so much to take back from the concept of how viral diseases can be prevented by plant-based diets, which is a trick which is right up the sleeves of everyone. We just need to use it. And Sheila, thank you. I think the Indian context is something that is so incredibly relevant to us, especially for a lot of people who are working now in the times of these pandemics, in terms of the things that they can do very much relevantly in their homes right now. For all the questions that we were unable to answer, I apologize, but please do feel free to write to us, send them to our social media accounts. We will share them with our esteemed panelists, and we will try and get you your answers as soon as possible. We will be sharing a feedback link. You can continue conversations with us on our social media channels, which are showing up on your screen right now. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, Dr. Campbell, Ms. Amber, Ms. Sheila, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy talking to us as much as we loved having this conversation with you. And we hope to keep the conversation going and having this food for thought continue with the concept and the ideas of having holistic wellness for all of us. For our audience, thank you again for your time. You can continue the conversations on Prana and Universal Wellness with us over the next 2 weekends as well, where we will be talking about more fundamentals about universal wellness. So you can go onto our website and check out those sessions as well. Until then, stay safe, everyone. Stay home. Enjoy your food. And I hope to connect with you all very soon. Thank you so much, all of you, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.